S3 and send you the resource, or do you want to do this exercise again?
Definitely not, because S3 I'm aware too, so I'm good.
So
Yeah.
okay, then I'll do one thing. We are left with two things, IAM and load balancing, which we will be taking up today. I don't know how far we can go, but we'll try to wrap this up today. And S3, so when I share the code next time, you will also find the S3 code. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. I'll put in with this lifecycle policy which we had discussed other day, right? So
Yeah.
I'll add 2-3 different types of lifecycle policy, and I'll put it into the code, and I'll send it your way. Okay. So let's
Yep.
start with IAM. Okay. So what we will be doing today is we'll start with IAM, where what we are going to do is I'm going to create an IAM policy, okay, which will give full access on S3. Okay, then we'll create a role, okay, which will use the policy which is created above. Okay, then what we are going to do is we'll apply this role to a EC2 instance and see that we can access S3 from that instance.
Yeah.
Okay, so this we will be doing to understand
And also,
to see how do we deal with. Yeah,
and also, can you tell me the assume roles, how to use, like in the
assume
another
roles. Okay.
VPC, I want to assume the role of the
Yeah.
another VPC. So
No, it's not assume the role of another VPC. Okay, I'll tell you. See. Okay. So what happens is
I mean, like two
there are,
accounts, right? Yeah, just to make sure. Yeah,
I'll tell you. I'll explain you the concept. Okay.
please.
So
Yeah.
there are multiple roles. Okay. So there are multiple types of roles. Okay. There are what do you say, service roles, okay, user roles, and okay. So what happens, what basically this role does? Okay, so what it will be doing is, you know about something called as STS. Okay, it's a token service. Okay, so it provides us temporary credentials to work with AWS.
Okay.
Okay, so you see, when when let's say today we have created a programmatic user. Okay, we have created a programmatic user, we have the access key and password, so we are able to connect to AWS and we are able to do the activity. Okay, let's say there is a federated user. Let's say your organization uses federated user, like it has single sign-on and it has LDAP setup, and that LDAP is configured, your AWS is configured to use that LDAP. Okay, in that case, your organization username password is not going to work with AWS, right?
Right.
So what happens? AWS, okay, AWS first your organization will take in your username and password. Okay, your LDAP will provide a token, okay, that you are going to take to AWS. Okay, so that token you are going to take to AWS, and then AWS is going to request to your LDAP and see if the token is valid. If the token is valid, in that case, this STS service of AWS that will provide you temporary credentials, okay, which you can use to access your AWS account. Okay, so
Is
if
it KMS key, something like that?
no, it's not KMS key.
Okay, it's a different, right? Because that's an I got
KMS key is to encrypt your EBS volumes or databases like that. That is for
correct.
encryption. This is
I got it. So this is basically for authentication. What we are trying
Yes,
to.
this is for authentication. This is for
Correct.
authentication. Okay.
Yeah.
Similarly, what happens is if a resource of AWS wants to access another resource. Okay. If a resource wants to access another resource, that also needs authentication. For example, if I want EC2 is a service, okay, and S3 is a service. If I want to access S3 from EC2, then also I need credentials.
Correct.
Okay, where from these credentials will be coming? These credentials will be coming from STS only. Okay,
Okay.
how STS will why STS will provide you credentials if you are authorized to access S3? How that will know that? If you have a role associated with you. Okay, so what happens is we'll create a role
Okay, okay,
here in
okay.
between.
I
We'll
think
create a
you explained here. So there are two ways. One is within AWS service, also they need an permissions,
correct.
right? So
Yes,
yeah, and the
yes.
other one is an outside of AWS. Yeah, the first
So now,
example you.
so now
Yeah.
we need to have a role created. Okay, this role needs to be attached to EC2. Okay, this role needs to be attached to EC2. This is called as assuming a role.
Oh, okay, okay.
Okay, so when I create this role, okay, when I create this role, yeah, so there is something called as a trust relationship. Okay, so that provides you information which service can assume this role. Okay, autoscaling at amazon.com. Okay, so Amazon autoscaling service only can assume this role. Similarly, when I am going to create, okay, when I'm going to create the role EC2, here I'm going to provide who is able to assume this role. So it will be, let's say, EC2 dot. So that makes EC2 be eligible service to assume this role. Okay, similarly, if you are doing it for a LDAP user, okay, then there is something called as federated identity and all. So you will have to set up the you have to set up this trust accordingly, so that it will be set up for a user. Okay, now for EC2 you have to set up this trust such that this role is allowed to be assumed by any EC2 instance. Okay, so I first in the role provide permission who is able to assume it. Then I go ahead and attach this role to that particular service. Then when that service is in execution, that service will assume this role. Now, once this role is assumed, what all things the service can do? Okay, then comes the concept of policy. Okay, every role has some policy attached to it. Here there will be definition of which all services it can access. Okay, if this policy definition contains it has access to S3, then it can access S3. Okay,
Yep.
getting me? Now,
Yep.
talking about multiple accounts. Okay, let's say there is account 1, there is account 2. Okay, you need to access the S3 buckets of account 1 from account 2, suppose. Okay, so what you will need to do is, first here you will have to create a role, okay, which will create this trust. Okay, this trust is there. It has to trust the root user of EC2. Okay, root user, and then you provide whatever policy. Then you attach this with policy. Okay, suppose that policy allows access to S3 bucket. Okay, then in this, okay, in this you will have to define, you will have to create other role, your admin role. Okay, now your admin can directly access this policy. Okay, directly assume this policy, because it provides a root level access, and admin can, it provides access to the root level, and admin can assume anything, okay, which is permitted for that account. Okay, but now for any other role, let's say your power user,
Yeah.
this admin needs to allow. Okay, you need to create a, what you say, you need to create a policy, you need to create a policy now. You need to create a policy which allows allows a user to assume role from account 1. Understood? On account 2, you have to create a policy that will allow anyone who uses this policy to assume role from here. Now here it comes this
STS.
STS assume
Yeah.
role.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, this needs to be written in a policy, and that policy needs to be attached. Now your admin is going to attach this new policy to AWS power user role. Then your AWS power user will be able to assume the role which is created in account 1, and thus be able to access S3 bucket in account 1. This is the concept of assuming role.
Yep. Yep.
Getting me?
Yep. Got it. Yeah.
Fine.
Thanks. Yeah.
Great. Chalo. Now let's get down with our demo. Okay.
Yeah.
So as I said, first let's do one thing. I did some dry runs so that we don't waste our time. So I'll just create new folder. Let's say I'll make it IAM2. Let me write it for the time being. So what I will do is I'll pick up couple of things from here. Let me first take my EC2 security group. Let it be there. Okay, and I take my EC2. Then providers.tf security.tf tf bars variables.tf policy role. There is variable.tf. And then there are variable.tf. What? Source. Now let's open ec2.tf. My instance. Okay, here is my EC2 definition. Okay, I am going to create an EC2 instance by the name tf demo instance. I'll use the Linux AMI T3 micro type. Other day, the way we did it, we'll be using a key pair, and then okay, AWS security group. Okay. I'm using a security group which allows SSH. So let me copy the security group as well. Okay, it's there. Security group is also there. So these all things we have already done. Okay, so that's why
Yep.
I'm rushing through. Okay, it allows me SSH and egress port, like it allows all outgoing activities. Okay, so that's done. Now let's go back again on EC2. Security group is done. Now subnet ID. Okay, so what I'll be doing is I already have certain subnets and VPCs created. I'm going to use them. Okay, so subnet creation and all, we have already seen that, so I'm not going to repeat it. So I'll directly use certain subnets which are available with me. So the subnet ID, I am taking it from a variable. So let me just go ahead and I don't know. Why is my variable file here? I'm looking my eyes. So let me open up the variable. Okay, so I have public subnet ID and public VPC ID defined. Okay, in my variable, those I'll be using. Okay, so this one, you see, we are using the public subnet ID here. Okay,
Yep.
now then I'll remove these. I'll use this later. Instance profile is something when I describe, I'll be using it. Key pair source instance profile. Fine. So this is an EC2 which you can see. Okay, all these things we have done earlier. So let me just go ahead and provision this EC2. Before that, I'll show you let me just update. So I'll go to my VPC. I have a public VPC. Let me take its ID so that the EC2 gets created in the public VPC and we are able to access it directly. That's why I'll just use my VPC. AWS is a vast thing. Like
Yep.
more you go on using, more things you need to you will get to know and all. So
Yep.
like this STS things I explained you in very overall thing just so that you get an
Right.
idea. But in depth, if you get into that, there would be like we'll have explanation for many things like how does STS work with federated user, how does it work with the web identity and all, how this token passing happens, all these things will
Yep.
come into
Yeah.
picture in
Yeah.
detail.
Yeah. Previous days we
So
used to learn like a Kerberos, when the Kerberos is authentication, the
ha.
same concepts will come, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Because we use
that's
these assumed role policies frequently, so that's the reason I just asked the
um,
question. What is it? But yeah,
so
I
TF
will study
man.
because this week I'm little free. Um, I need to study a lot this week. Yeah, that's my goal of study. Yeah, but I don't know how much I can make it.
Okay, so we have this VPC, public VPC here. Now let me go to subnets. I'll take the public subnet ID. My public subnet 1. Let me copy the ID of that. My subnet ID. I'll paste it here. Now my public subnet. My access key. Okay, so we are ready. Our EC2 instance and the security group, as I showed you, that's going to allow all EC2 all connections, SSH connections. Okay, so let's just go ahead and do a Terraform minute here. I think I hope I have saved everything. Save. It's already there. Save. Save. I am EC2. I am 2. I am 2. Okay. So let's in it. Sorry, what I'm doing. CMD. Tomorrow, if possible, we'll make it 2 hours if you are okay.
Tomorrow, Wednesday, right? Hopefully, yes. Yeah. But I don't know yet my calendar, but yeah. So
Yeah, sure, sure. No
we'll
problem,
do
no
that.
problem. So, init got successful. Let's create the Terraform plan and Terraform apply. Because or else, like I thought tomorrow would be the last. We'll finish everything, but it looks like even I have a hard stop at 7:30 in 30
No
minutes
problem.
today.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
some of it
Don't take
will roll over
rush.
to
If
tomorrow.
you want, we
If
can
we
have
don't
one session
finish
on
tomorrow,
weekend.
day after.
Yeah, yeah.
Day
That's fine.
after tomorrow, we can wrap it up.
Yeah, yeah. Be comfortable, and I'm okay anytime this week. Also, I'm little relaxed this week.
Okay.
Except I don't know. I have one appointment for my neck pain, so I need to see that. So like a therapy. I don't know when he's going to
Okay.
give that appointment. So
Oh, so I need to copy these keys which I'm using. I'll be using. If I remember correctly, we did it right. How we generate key and how do we
correct.
use key with
Yes.
EC2? That thing we did, na?
Yep. Correct.
Okay, okay, great, 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 great.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
not worry. So couple of keys I had generated. Those when I paste the files in this folder, I'm reading those keys. So those keys were not available in this folder. That's why it
Yeah.
threw this error. Now see, all things are working fine. We have three resources. One EC2. What else we have? Security
And
group.
two security groups, right?
No. AWS instance is there. We have okay. One key pair is there and security group. Okay, all good. So
Yeah.
now let's Terraform apply. Okay. Okay. Let's say yes. Okay, so we have an EC2 instance running. Let's go and see. Okay, so this one, TF demo instance. Okay, this is the one which we created. Now we'll go back to my script. My name is TF demo instance. Okay, the name.
Yeah.
Fine. This is what we created now. Now let me take the public IP of this one. Let me open putty. So this is already there. Putty. I'll just put that public address and I'm going to use the key tech tools TF demo AWS resources IAM2 TF demo 2 PPK key open. I'm able to connect to this system. Okay. So now what I will do is AWS S3 LS. Okay, I'm using a Linux to AMI, Amazon AMI. So it comes with AWS CLI already installed. Okay, so I don't need to install CLI. I can directly run the command. Okay, so when I'm trying to run, it is saying is I don't have the credentials configured. Okay, so
Right.
now what I will do is AWS configure. When we run AWS configure, it asks you to set the access key ID and access key password, right?
Right.
One way, I have a user created, I can pass on their access key and access password, but that's when I'm trying to access from outside. Okay, but when I'm letting a EC to use, so see, best practice is that you should use temporary credentials so that they keep on getting rolled over and they cannot be misused. But when you have permanent credentials, someone if gets hold of that, that can be misused, right? So wherever possible we should be using roles so that temporary credentials come into picture. Okay, so one way over here is I provide the access key ID and the secret key and continue. Okay, but that's again, that's not the recommended way. We'll have to, it's better to use the temporary credentials. So here I'll provide nothing. Default region is US hyphen east hyphen 1. Okay, nothing. Okay, so then let me go and try running this. Fine, so it's still not able to find the credentials. Okay, now
Yeah.
let's do one thing. Now let's go create certain roles which provides my EC2 server access on S3. Okay, let's
Right.
go ahead and do that. Take this policy.tf role.tf. Okay, now let me open policy.tf. Okay, here let me go on Terraform side. Okay, so you have AWS under IAM, you'll have CREFSEFGHI. Under IAM, you will have AWS IAM policy. Okay, this is the documentation for that. Okay, so what do we have? We have the policy name. Root path is where if you want to have some prefix or something to the policy, you can use this one. If you have this root path as slash, then somewhere where you need to use the policy name, you can directly use the name what you have given here. Okay, and then you have this policy description. Okay, so basically every policy consists of one or more statements, sorry, consists of statements where one or more policies can be defined. Okay, it's a list. Okay, and action is what you want to do. Okay, again a list of actions have to be provided. Here it says EC2 describe. So any resource to which this policy would be attached, they can just describe the EC2. But here if I put EC2 colon write star, so all the right things will be allowed like that. Or else if I make EC2 colon star, I remove describe. Okay, then it will allow all the actions on EC2. Okay, so this
Correct.
is the action means what you want to do. Okay, effect is allow. There are two options, allow and deny. If you put deny, whatever actions you have provided, they will not be allowed. Apart from them, others will be allowed. Okay,
Yeah.
and resource is on which resource you want to do. Okay, if you put star, you can do this on every EC2, but if you want to do this activity on specific EC2, you'll have to provide the ARN of that EC2. Okay, or regular expression you can use. Okay, so best practice is as much as possible avoid star, because architectural best policy is in terms of security is allow the least access privilege. Okay, so that's how. So these are the three major components of every policy statement. Okay, action, what is to be done, effect, whether to do or not to do, resource is on which this will be applied. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's go here what I have done. Okay, so what I'm doing is my effect is allow, my action is everything S3, my resource is on every S3 bucket. Okay, every action on which is possible from on S3 side, on every S3 bucket, I'm going to allow anyone who assumes this policy. Okay,
Okay. Okay.
so now
So this is what we added today, this last lines, or it was there in the IAM one as well, in the previous example.
which last line?
No, these like the policies,
So
the
I have
JSON.
not added yet. So the EC2 instance which we used, that doesn't have, see it, this is instance which we created now, right? It doesn't
Correct.
have access, it doesn't have this
Yep.
any credentials or anything,
Right.
because there is no roles attached to it.
Correct.
Okay, so when when I'm going to attach a role, okay, that role is going to provide temporary credentials, as
Yep.
I told you before.
Yep.
Okay, that role is going to provide you temporary credentials. No, sorry, because of that role, STS is going to provide temporary credentials to EC2 which can be used to access the S3. But
Correct.
how do we know those temporary credentials or the token which will be provided, what all actions it can do, and which all resources it can do? For that there is policy. Okay, now this policy will be attached to a role. Okay, there
Yep.
can be multiple policies attached to a role. Okay,
Yep.
role in layman terms, let's say you play a role of DBA. Okay, so now
Yep.
DBAs today, what you do is, today your organization is using RDS. So you create a policy which allows full access on RDS, and you give your role, give that, attach that policy to the DBA role. So tomorrow, now you decide to use Redshift. Okay, and your DBAs are responsible for using Redshift. So your role remains the same, the DBA role. Now you have additional requirement of using Redshift. So you
Correct.
create a policy which allows full access on Redshift, and you attach that policy to the same role, DBA. Now anyone who is using that DBA role, okay, earlier used to have access only on RDS. Now he is going to have access on RDS as well as your Redshift.
Okay. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's
Yeah.
policy has the rules. Okay, rule is now what I made you understand. Okay, so now your roles will be attached to a resource. Your resource will be assuming the role. Okay,
Yep.
and whatever policy will be associated with that role, it will be automatically, those rules will be applicable. Okay,
Yep.
so now what we'll be doing is we'll go ahead and we'll create a role. Okay, let's see now. Okay, let's go to the role documentation. I am role. Okay, here role will have a role name, and this is mandatory. Assume role policy. Okay, this is the trust factor which I explained you. Who can
Yep.
assume this role? Okay, fine. So the definition of this one is STS assume role, effect allow, and which service you have to allow. Okay, in our case, we are going to allow EC2. Okay, so it is EC2 Amazon.com. Okay, if instead of EC2 you are using a ECS container service, okay, and you want your container to access S3, so this would change. This role cannot be assumed by any ECS, okay, any container, okay, because this role is specifically made for EC2. So this would
Yep.
change here, ECR, sorry, ECS dot Amazon AWS.com. Then this role can be assumed by a container.
Yep.
Okay, so this is a mandatory part, your assume role policy, and you have this format here. Okay, how do you write this one? Okay, I explained you the different components of this one. Okay, so if we go here, you see here I have put in the assume role policy here. Okay, now my role is created, my policy is there. Now I have to attach this role to the policy. So there is another resource, AWS IAM policy attachment. So this takes in the role name, okay, and the policy ARN. Okay, so role name, I have created this role above. Okay, my AWS IAM role dot EC2 S3 access dot name of the role. I'm taking it from at runtime from this one. This will be created. Similarly, my policy here will be created runtime, and you see the name is S3 access policy, and I'm taking that the policy ARN AWS IAM policy dot S3 access policy dot ARN. So this is going to attach my policy to the role. Okay, fine. Now next
Yep.
thing what I'm going to is, now we have the policy, we have the role to which policy is attached. Now I need to put this policy in the EC2. I need to put this role to EC2. Okay, I need to
Yep.
let the EC2 know to use that role. So I'll do a little modification to my EC2 code. What I'm going to do is I have to go, let me open the EC2 file again. Okay, so see, so here what I will have to create is I'll have to create something called as a IAM instance profile. Okay, so this instance profile, when it is created for a EC2, this will associate a particular role with the EC2, and accordingly EC2 would be getting the temporary credentials. Okay, so you see here on AWS instance profile resource,
Yep.
I am passing the role. Okay, now how what I'm doing is here I'm adding another property in my EC2 by the name IAM instance profile, and I'm giving this value, this one which I'm creating here. Got it?
Yep.
Okay, so by using AWS instance profile, I'm attaching that role which I'm going to create Okay, and once that role is attached, now I will be having temporary credentials which can access the S3. So first we created a policy, okay, which provides full access on S3. We attach that policy to a particular role, okay, and then we that role, and in that role there is a definition that this role can only be assumed by EC2. Any EC2 instance can assume this one, okay, and then we are creating a instance profile through which we are attaching that particular role to the EC2 instance which we are creating. Okay,
Yeah.
so as we have introduced some new resources, what we need to do is we need to
The unit need to be run.
init, yes.
Yeah.
So close these others. So my init is successful. Let me run the plan.
So in the just on the overall about roles and users roles and policies,
Mhm.
I know it's an out of the topic. So policies are general, that can apply to any resource. Again,
Yeah.
what resource you want to apply, that is there in the resource. Like it may be EC2 or it may be ECS, but the
So
single
see,
policy can attach
policies,
to.
policy you cannot attach directly to a role resource. Okay. So there are resource based policies, okay, which you define on the resource. For example, the S3 bucket policy is there.
Right.
Okay, that is done on the bucket.
Correct.
Okay, but you create an IAM policy that you cannot attach directly to a resource. For that, the policy needs to be attached to a role, and that role will be assumed by the resource.
Yeah. 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 Okay. Okay.
Okay, and at one time, one resource can assume only one role.
Got
Okay,
it.
for example, if the EC2 has assumed the role to be able to access S3 now, and
Yep.
after 5 minutes you want to change the assume role of that EC2 to access, let's say, SQS. Okay, in that case the EC2 has to give up the first role to take up the second role.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so if you want multiple things to happen, so either you have to create your policy in such a way that it allows you multiple service activities,
Correct.
then with one role only you can do, or else if you want multiple roles, then at a time it can only assume one role. Okay,
Yep.
those policies would be attached to roles, and roles will be assumed by the resources.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, and
Okay.
if there is any policy which is directly by the resource, those are resource policies, those are not IAM policies. Resource policies are again different, as I gave you example of the bucket policy, which
Yep.
is there on the bucket itself. You define who all can access the bucket.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, IAM. So let me do Terraform. So now over here you see there are 4 to add, 1 to change. What is this change? Change is the EC2, because my EC2 is already in place. What I'm doing is I'm adding a role to EC2. So it's not going to recreate the EC2. It is going to
Yep.
change. So this is the delta which we were talking earlier in the initial days. It looks
Correct.
into the state file, finds out the resource is already there. I need to make a modification. Okay.
Correct.
So
Yep.
now let me go ahead and make Terraform apply. Okay.
In one of the interview, he was asking about CloudFormation nested templates. So I was
Yeah,
explaining, nested
one
templates are,
template using background.
because I know Terraform very well. I was explaining the modular concept and how the CloudFormation is trying to, do that. So creating those things. So he was very impressed.
Great.
Yeah, this scripting kind of, resources are, spinning based on the scripting is amazing, man. It's like, yeah, something all I need to,
So now,
yeah, go ahead.
now if we go to security, now you see the my ECS S3 access role has been added to the instance, right?
EC2 S3
This
access.
is the
Yeah.
role which we created now, right? Now that has been added to the instance now. So let's go ahead and see our role. This is what we created, right? My EC2 S3 access. Now this has been created. Now we go here, the same place. What we'll do is, come on, I think. Okay, I think this needs to be. Let me open up.
Hopefully, we should work on the same session unless it is.
No, no, something went wrong. Network issue. Okay. No, no, this is the putty getting disconnected. It's not a problem. It's not a problem. C2, let me just tap again. Okay, now AWS. I'll do the same
Configure.
thing. I'll keep it empty. US East 1 is default, which I had set. Now AWS S3 LS. You see, I got the list of the buckets which I have. So
Yeah.
this attaching the role provided temporary credentials to my EC2, which the EC2 by STS and EC2 was able to access the S3 bucket. So basically, yeah, we covered up how using Terraform we can create IAM policies, IAM roles, and then how we can attach that role to EC2. So similarly, there are other things where we can create a user, and then also creating of user is also there. That is a small thing. If you want, I can cover up in tomorrow's lecture. But most important was the role concept, the role and the policy concept which
Yeah.
we saw, and how do we attach it. So there is a way we figured out to attach to EC2. Now policies can be attached to other what do you say, other resources as well. So let's say, for example, RDS. In RDS you don't have to create a attach policy resource. In RDS properties itself there will be a placeholder for IAM policy. You just have to put the policy name, so the
Yeah.
RDS will assume the policy. Sometimes what happens is we have to restore the RDS from S3 buckets. RDS by default doesn't have access on S3 buckets, so you have your, let's say, Oracle, you have the .bkp file or something of SQL Server. Let's say the .bkp file of SQL Server. I have put it on a S3 bucket. I want to restore that SQL Server on my RDS using the backup file from S3. So my RDS would need a access on S3, right? The read access. So
Yeah.
what I would do is I would create a policy which provides read access to a particular bucket. Then I'll attach it to a role, and that role I'm going to uh, put it on RDS. So RDS, when it needs to read the S3 bucket, it will assume that role, and then it will go ahead and it will read the backup file from the S3 bucket and it will restore itself like that.
Yep. Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah.
So I hope Anand, today's session was useful regarding IAM roles and policies. I have a hard stop
Yes.
now. We'll
Yes,
close it
please.
for the day.
Yeah.
Tomorrow I'll try it, if possible, if you can extend till 2 hours, tomorrow we'll try to
Oh, I
wrap up
will.
the
So
entire thing.
you only
Only one.
one thing what I said, right? So because if I get like my doctor's appointment in the morning, I will let you know in
Uh-huh,
advance. Hopefully, I'll
uh-huh,
postpone to later day, but I don't
uh-huh.
know their availability. But I will let you
Okay,
know
fine.
if anything
Just,
changes.
just, just let me know. Okay,
Yeah.
if possible, we'll wrap up, or else at least with this load balancer, all important things will be over. I told you only one last web application. How do we deploy it?
Yeah.
HTML
Yeah.
file or something. That
Appreciate.
demo will be there. I'll try to club it with the load balancer itself. Okay, so that
Please.
tomorrow we can wrap up the thing. Okay,
No problem. No problem. Yeah.
fine, Anand. Have a good
Sure.
day
Thank you
ahead.
so much.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.